can't I can't start this and not start laughing. All right. Hi everybody. Thank y'all for joining us for our Beef Brunch news update for Tuesday, April the 30th. Trip and Lee are both on the road, so we're going to go ahead and let Trip kick it off for our Northeast region update.
How's it going, everybody? Thank y'all for having me again this week. I am traveling today. I'm headed to Winsboro, Louisiana for our Beef Quality Assurance Certification event that we've had on the calendar. Been looking forward to. Headed to go over there and get set up. Really looking forward to getting to spend the evening with some of our producers from the Richland, Franklin, Catahoula, Concordia area. It's shaping up to be a good evening. Um, Agriculturally going on around the region, guys. The volunteer ryegrass crop was probably one of the best I'd ever seen this year, but it's rapidly playing out. Even guys that have enough cattle to stay ahead of it to some extent, it's pretty well playing out. Some of our planted varieties, they're hanging in there, especially guys that can stay ahead of it, which not advocating overstocking by any stretch of the imagination, but guys have stayed ahead of it. They're still seeing a little bit of growth out of it, but everybody's fighting it headed out. So we're kind of entering that transitional period where our spring and winter forages are kind of starting to play out, and our summer grasses are starting to kick off and get growing. We're seeing some growth out of all of our summer forages, but it's not quite enough to really lean on. So we're hoping to get a few more weeks limped through in this transitional period. Guys that have had or guys that have the ability to wrap silage and haylage. Most of them have gotten done with their first round. If not, they're getting pretty scary close to it. They've taken advantage of some of this good weather that we've had. And guys that rely on dry hay, most of them have gone through their equipment and they're anxiously eyeing that 14-day forecast, looking for a window. They're ready to get in the field and get it on. We just haven't had the weather up in our part of the world to get it done. Now, I know somebody's going to hear this and say, "Well, I know so and so up the road got a crop or got a cut in a dry hay put up." Well, that may be true, but as a whole, most producers that I've talked to have not been brave enough to try and get that cut and dried down yet. We're pretty well done with our spring calving up this way. Of course, there's a few stragglers here and there, and that doesn't count the guys that calve year round. Guys with seasonal calving. Spring calving's pretty well done, and we've got bulls out. Just a note on you bulls: be keeping a close eye on them. We tie a lot of money up into our bull power, so we want to do all we can to help take care of them. One thing I've noticed going out, Ashley picked on me about this last week. I was supposed to have a show and tell for y'all this week, but my traveling interfered with that. Uh, we've got some producers that are fighting some pretty severe compaction. That's something that just year after year is a problem, and because it goes unattended. And we've got cattle on our fields and we've got tractors on our fields, and those are two compacting machines. Be aware there's a lot of ways we can fight back against compaction, and get with your local extension agent to talk more about it. But just the grasses you have growing out there can help fight it. If you've got something actively growing year round, you're pushing with your roots. You got your soil biology kicked off. You've got earthworms. You've got things that are helping you fight back against the compaction. But if you need to, we have mechanical options also. After you get this first cutting out of the way and the ground firms up a little bit, great time to go ahead and run an aerator to the field. I wouldn't dare advocate aerating in a time where we're looking at drought conditions, because if you have moderately dry ground, if you want to turn it into powder, go to poking holes in it. But right now that we're getting pretty consistent rainfall, now's a great time to go ahead and run your aerator. Now, you do need that ground to firm up just a little bit to where you can actually do some fracturing in the soil. Excuse me. If you're dragging an aerator through some jello, you're just poking holes and you're not getting the full effect of it. Another thing to note on compaction is knowing where you're fighting compaction issues in the soil. Most of our agents have a tool we use called a penetrometer that can tell you at what depth you're experiencing compaction, and that might change how you approach fighting it. If you're compacted at the soil surface, you might can do some light tillage and get around it. But if you're compacted, 6, 8 inches down, you might need to take more extreme extreme measures to really get ahead of it. So work with your extension personnel and your parishes to help come up with a strategy for dealing with it, because everybody's context is going to be different on that. Some people might be willing to sacrifice a pasture or paddock and really rejuvenate it, run a chisel plow or something through it, whereas some people might need to take a less invasive route. Guys, that is about all that I have for today's update.
Thank you, sir. Safe travels the rest of the way to Winsboro.
All right, y'all take
Lee,
care.
Lee, we'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Ashley. Very glad to be with you all here today. Kind of a wet period here in northwest Louisiana, much as what Tripp experienced in northeast part of the state. Uh, Rainfall event after rainfall event. There's been some dry hay put up around and abouts, but as in the northeast part of the state, most everybody that dry bales hay is sitting on the sidelines waiting. The clover, my goodness, I have never seen the clover crop, especially in the Red River Valley, to be as good as what it is right now. It is phenomenal, folks. And of note, I've seen more Persian clover this spring than I've seen in a long time. It's funny how these things work and how different years can have different outcomes as far as clover and those natural seed populations, seed banks, so to speak. But a lot of crimson clover, a lot of white clover as per usual, especially in the Red River Valley, and the cattle are definitely benefiting. Um, Starting to deal with some fly pressures, in particular, stable fly pressures. Been noticing pretty good loads on cattle on that and huddled up. And I think in the next couple of news updates, we'll probably have to start talking about some fly control measures. Might be just a little early in the game, getting too much rainfall right now to really to really get out there and try to make a control, at least up in our corner of the state. And so we'll probably try to talk about that sometime soon. I don't know that the fly pressures have become burdensome just yet, but I guarantee you, folks, it's Louisiana and we're headed into the warm season. They will be. Just going through my notes here as far as everything else, we had our beef and forage field day at the Red River Research Station last Thursday. Had a really good time, pretty good turnout. Got to see a lot of producers and enjoyed visiting with them. A lot of friends and folks that are in the cattle industry, and so appreciate those y'all. I know several of y'all that listened came and turned out. We had really good weather. We were able to sneak that one in between rain, so to speak, and so that was a really good deal. I know Ashley's going to talk about it, but the DeSoto Cattleman's field day is coming up on May the 10th, and Joshua Salley puts that on. He's there at the DeSoto Parish Extension Office, county agent there, and I know he's planning a good program, and the RSVP date is coming up soon, and so Ashley will give us some more details as to that. But that's going to be May 10th. It's going to be down to Branch Ranch, at their Mansfield Ranch. Good friends of ours there at the Branch Ranch, good people down there, and so look forward to going down and visiting with them. As far as the markets goes, haven't been able to shake the spookiness on it here lately, folks, and the markets have been mixed at best, I would say. One thing to highlight as far as what's been going on with the cattle markets is the fact that we've seen the numbers drop, the census numbers drop at these local sale barns, and people just kind of waiting and watching on some cattle. And I believe that there are some cattle left in the country that people are holding back until things stabilize, until some of this volatility exits the market. But honestly, folks, this cattle market's been quite volatile the last several years, and the prices are historically really good right now. Jumping into our market reports, I'll give you the range of averages as far as the last 2 weeks in Louisiana markets. As a reminder, these are self-reported market numbers coming from the sale barn, so this isn't USDA graded reports and everything. On the 500, 600 pound steers, the average of the prices was $1.96 to $2.85 per pound. 5 to 6 weight heifers, $1.74 to $2.50 per pound. Cull cows, 96 cents to $1.37 per pound. Cull bulls, $1.16 to $1.59. Bred cows, they averaged $2,052.78. Can't forget those 78 cents per head, folks. That's tremendous. We've come a long way on the price of these replacement cows. And on pairs, 2,400 was the average price. The ever important percent change from our last market report. On the 5 to 6 weight steers, they experienced a 3.8% decrease. 5 to 6 weight heifers, a 3.85% decrease. Cull cow prices decreased by 1.7%. And the bright spot, if there is one, is the cull bulls experienced a 0.36% increase. So that's really steady is what that's called, but you take the good with the bad on that. I will say, as I was compiling this data and looking at it, the spread as far as the prices was really high, and that tells me quite a bit. It tells me that we're probably getting some mixed quality cattle coming in there, but it also tells me that the good quality cattle, those number one steers and heifers, are probably still hanging on to those good prices on the top end. So, folks, I mean, the old saying goes, and I know I've said it here, good cattle are always worth good money. And sometimes they're not as much as we want them to be, and sometimes they're not as much as what we think they should be bringing. But, folks, we're still at good levels on these prices. We hope that the market will lose some of these jitters. You know, we're dealing with some outbreak jitters. I hadn't talked about it on these reports, and I don't think I'm going to start now, but just some animal health outbreak issues is one thing. War jitters is always something that we have to confront whenever international conflict comes up. But I think and I hope that we can get past this and we can continue to build a solid market and a record-setting market and that'll lead me into the final thing. I had the opportunity to go down and visit with the good folks with Superior Livestock down there at the Gulf Coast Classic sale they had in Natchitoches a couple of weeks ago, last week, in fact, and or week before last, excuse me. My weeks are starting to run together with me. Really good time visiting with a lot of people, talked to a lot of producers that are marketing their cattle there, a lot of good Louisiana cattle being sold, and what a good experience that is for the Louisiana cattle industry to be able to highlight. I think they sold over 80,000 head or something the day I was there. But anyway, to be able to highlight the Louisiana cattle industry by having that national sale right there in Natchitoches, Louisiana, right in the heart of cattle country in Northwest Louisiana, what a great deal. So kudos to everybody with Superior Livestock and people involved in that. What a great event. And I think that's all I got, Ashley.
Thank you, sir. I know I hate that I missed the Northwest Field Day, and I'm also going to be missing Josh's because I have to be at Dean Lee that day. But just since he mentioned it really quick, the DeSoto Parish Field Day that he mentioned on Friday, May 10th, Josh is asking that you get RSVPs into him by this Friday, May 3rd. So I've got that information in the video and podcast description. Topics, there's an herbicide demo plot. They're going to discuss a bull development program. I believe that's the one that they have at the Branch Ranch. Mineral supplementation, heat stress, and farm pond maintenance are some of the topics that they've got planned. So as Lee said, it will be a really good field day there at the Branch Ranch in Mansfield. Brittany, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thanks, Ashley. So I will say last week, I think we had some mild weather, a little bit cooler temperatures in the beginning of the week. And then, of course, this morning, we got this good, another good thunderstorm that came through. Luckily, it wasn't quite as severe as the one we had a few weeks ago. I'm not totally sure yet how much rainfall we actually got. But we'll be looking, to check those rainfall numbers in the next couple of days. And of course, there was some very severe weather last week out in the Midwest. So our thoughts and prayers go out to all those affected in those areas as well by those devastating tornadoes there. Some things we have going on locally, we've had several producers that in the past few weeks have been baling the excess ryegrass that they have, whether that was planted or volunteer ryegrass. We've seen a lot of that coming up. And then this weekend, I know out by where I live, just on the east side of Evangeline Parish, we saw lots of people that were baling their hay and picking up their bales and getting them stored just ahead of this rainfall that we were anticipating coming today, Monday, as we're recording this. So I did have some questions about testing the moisture. One of the ways that you can test your moisture for your hay is through using a moisture meter. But if you don't have one of those, and Lee and I spoke just in the last week or so about the microwave method where you can go ahead and test for moisture. And per Lee's advice, he says make sure you don't use the microwave in your house because it can definitely stink up the house. So he recommended just getting a cheap one from Walmart or something like that to be able to do this. And you can check for all the exact steps on this method. You can check with your extension agent, but just to kind of be brief about it, you want to basically what you're trying to do is you're weighing your hay out. So weigh it before you put it in the microwave, record that weight. And then you want to go in short intervals and you want to record the weight each time. And you would continue this process about 30 seconds each until you get back-to-back weights that are the same, or you would get charring. And if you do have charring occur, just go ahead and use the last recorded weight before you had that charring. So from here to figure the moisture content, you would take the weight of the forage before heating and then subtract that final weight that you got after the heating process, and then divide that by the weight that you started with, right? Multiply that by 100, and that's going to give you the moisture content in a percentage. So let's say your moisture content comes out to be 14%. So that would mean that your dry matter content is 86%, right? Because it's out of 100. And if you do a forage analysis using our Forages lab on campus, when you get the results from that, you'll see two columns of data. One's going to be the dry matter content, and then the other one's going to be that on the as fed basis, which that reflects just the total nutrient concentration, including the water that's in that sample. So since moisture content can vary from sample to sample, you want to make sure that when you're comparing different samples that you are using that dry matter basis column there. We also had some concerns about people that their hay may have been put up too wet. So what can happen there if the hay is put up too wet is something called a Maillard reaction, which is the browning process that happens between amino acids and the sugars under heat. So you'll see this, an example of this is when cooking, if you're searing a steak and it gets that nice brown crust on it, right? That's an example of a Maillard reaction. So in hay, when the proteins become bound to the lignin, it reduces the digestibility of the hay. So it'll have a sweet smell to it, and the livestock will readily consume that, but they aren't able to fully utilize the proteins in the hay. So that's something that you want to look out for as well. And then last week, we had a couple people had reached out asking if we could test some of that ryegrass that they had baled. Vince and I did one last week, and then I did another one for another producer as well. We're just kind of waiting the results of those right now from our Forages lab. But for anyone that is interested in, getting that hay tested just to find out the nutrient content that there, you can get with your local extension agent. Several of us have a core sampler that works really nicely to get those samples out. And for a routine analysis with our Forages lab, it's $15 per sample. And then just kind of the last thing that I'll touch on with the hay is for storing your hay. So ideally, you would want to have that hay stored under a barn and just completely out of the weather. you're unable, if you don't have a barn, you might want to consider maybe using a tarp. So when you have a tarp to help protect the hay, you're still going to have some dry matter loss. It could be up to about 8%. And if you have hay that's just sitting out in the weather, just no tarp, not under cover at all, it can have dry matter losses up to 31%. So those are just some things to keep in mind, and then that would, in turn reduce the quality of your hay. We're definitely coming into hay season, and we're going to be seeing a lot of that coming up. And then, as we get dry over the next, few weeks or so, we've got some, hay production going for sure. So that is all I have for now, and I will turn it over to Vince. Oh, wait, sorry, one more. Didn't want to say the Master Cattleman that we are hosting here in the Central Region in Opelousas. We just completed week 3, and we are starting week 4 this week. Thanks to all the presenters that have come and presented so far. We've got, few more weeks left to go here, right, till the beginning of June. And also in St. Landry Parish, where I'm domiciled at, their Cattlemen's Association held their annual meeting and banquet on Friday, April 19th. They're really looking to get hopefully their membership numbers up there. And there's talk of us possibly planning a field day later this year. And Evangeline Parish Cattlemen as well have reached out to me, and we're going to be having a meeting coming up in the next month or so. They are wanting to schedule a field day for, I believe, in September. So now I will go ahead and turn it over to Vince.
Thank you, Brittany. Thank you, Ashley. I'll just kind of follow up on a couple of things that were already mentioned for our area. Like Lee mentioned about horn flies, we had a really big uptick in numbers on horn flies, and some producers have been proactive as far as taking measures of penning cattle and spraying them, putting out back rubs, and putting out some of the IGR component minerals, which we're seeing somewhat of a relief because it's cool. We've had some cooler, rainier weather. It doesn't seem the fly populations don't seem to be as bad when we get normal rainfall. It seems to be a little more severe when we have droughty conditions. So just be prepared and get those cattle in. And for a lot of these products to work, you got to knock the populations down. So bringing cattle in is the unnecessary or the necessary evil, I guess you could say, about penning cattle for some extra reason. But it's getting time for spring workings, and there's quite a bit of that going on right now. Vaccinations, and certainly we want to remind you to get with your veterinarian and continue that relationship, the vet-client relationship, to make sure your vaccine protocols are in place. For certain, the clostridial vaccines on calves and respiratory vaccines. If you're on a vac program going into your marketing year, also get those comprehensive vaccinations for your cow herd and your bulls. Bulls bring to mind pretty much all of the bull sales have wrapped up. There are still a few remaining, but be conscientious of your bulls and the fertility, because there are a lot of bulls out right now in herds, and this is going to be a popular week this week, next week, and the next 2 weeks for those herd bulls to be out and doing their job on the ranch as far as having calves between February and the March timeframe. So it's time to make sure that those things are taken care of moving forward. We talk about working cattle. The cattle handling component of the Master Cattleman program that Brittany was talking about earlier was the first session of her program in Opelousas, and we always want to remind folks to handle cattle with ease. Try to eliminate commotion. Cattle get easily stressed out as our daytime temperatures will be on the rise. Forecast is calling for upper 80s into the 90s in the next 10 days. So just be conscientious of that. Also, the volatility of your vaccines to keep them cooled and shaded, not to lose the efficacy of those products. So it's all just some things to be reminded of as we move into the spring and late spring and early summer. As we're gonna, you want to make sure that you are proactive on taking care of those input costs and and keeping that relatively low or as low as possible, with the cost of production continuing to be on the rise. So I'll just touch on Lee and Trip both alluded to some baleage in their part of the world up in North Louisiana. We did have a pretty good stretch of weather last week, as Brittany alluded to. There was some ryegrass hay made, and we did have a 6-day period where some ryegrass volunteer and some cultivars that were planted for grazing got baled, and we were able to get it down to 13 to 14% moisture. Some of that got pushed into a higher moisture category towards the weekend with the rain coming today. And in communicating with some of the parishes to the western side of the state, I think they had like 5 inches of rain to kind of support what Brittany was alluding to about not really sure what the measurements were, but I know I measured right at 4 inches at my place this morning. So it was significant rain, but we needed some rain. It was getting dry, and the forecast, the extended forecast. We had a meeting at Dean Lee this morning and kind of discussing that related to crops. They're talking about some record temperatures again this summer and some droughty conditions possible. So my recommendation, and we always communicate, if you have that extra winter forage moving into the period that we're moving into, it's important that you probably get that baled up and get it saved. Not so worried about marketing hay this time of the year. And I think that we can all share that our highest quality forages come in early spring with our ryegrass and clover mixes, with a touch of our warm season grasses in there, whether it be Bermuda, Alicia, or Bahia, or whatever it may be. And the sample may not look good because you can have some winter annuals that are coming to seed and not make a good sample, but your highest quality forages are going to come from an agronomic standpoint, are going to come to you in your spring cutting, your first spring cutting. So make an effort to get that hay stored. If you have a barn, as Brittany alluded to, that's always the best option. Not everyone has a barn. Either try to put net wrap. I know I do my own baling on my farm. I put as much string as I can possibly, not to take too much time in the process, but I put extra string on it to form a layer, that because I don't have a barn to store my hay in. So I put extra few wraps of string to make sure that those wraps are close, and it seals it off a whole lot better than if you don't use enough string. So those are just some pointers that I've learned over the years, and we'd like to share with producers, and take advantage of that extra forage right now, because it may be short moving forward as the predictions are to be somewhat similar to what we experienced last year. So I hate to get into that topic, but it's reality, and we just want to make the best of what we have at hand at the moment. So I'll close with that, and we need to take be proactive about our fly treatment, and remember about our water troughs. And cows will consume. Ashley, help me out here. What, 30-something gallons a day per grown cow in the heat of the summer. Make sure your water troughs are clean and functioning, and that's going to be very critical. If your herd bulls are not out, if you've taken them off from the fall breeding season, make sure that they're where you can see them every day. I mean, that's going to be probably your biggest investment, next to what Lee talked about, bred cows at the sale barns, locally selling for over $2,000. There's a lot of pairs being sold for $3,500 to $4,000 right now. That's astronomical and expensive. So it's our advantage to take care of those animals and where we can see them every day, especially our bulls. They're a precious commodity, and there's the days of $2,500 bulls are gone. And when you can get near $3,000 for a bull that's yielding any kind of carcass at the sale barns today. So you're looking at minimum $4,500 to $6,500 on a run-of-the-mill potential herd bull. So be cautious of those expenses that you have in front of you, and take care of them, because it's the volatility of the market, as Lee alluded to, is in front of us, and it's not. It looks like might have a year or two of these higher prices, according to some of the conversation I've had with local producers and them talking to some of their marketing factors. We might well see a couple of years of these high prices. So take care of what's in front of you, keep the flies off of them, and keep them comfortable. And you should be in a couple of years for some good returns as far as taking care of business. So it's about all I have, and I'll close with that.
Thank you. Now, I was looking through my list as everyone was going. I don't have a whole heck of a lot more to add. I drove in from Farmerville to the Deanley station in Alexandria this morning. I left Farmerville about 5:30, and it was just nice, slow, steady rain. Some pretty lightning hit a few times, but nice, slow, steady rain. Thankfully, the drive wasn't too terrible. So I know everybody got at least a few inches, I feel like, throughout the state, depending on where you were. And I had on my list too, we were talking about we need to do some maintenance to some of our shade structures here at the station. And I know they're building some up at the Hill Farm as well. So just to tag on to what Vince was saying, I've heard the same thing too. We're looking at hot and dry again this summer. And so be thinking about grazing plan, grazing strategy. If you need to supplement with feed, kind of what that might look like. And go ahead and start looking at getting shade structures up if you need to, or where you may have to put your cattle if you do need extra shade, and getting those moved. The last thing for me to add in would be our Advanced Master Cattleman. We've talked about it before, but we are still taking registrations for those. I have registration due by this Friday, May 3rd. If you don't think you're going to be able to get it mailed in on time, just send me an email. Let me know that it's coming, because we're kind of borderline on how many we have. So please advertise it. Please share it. We do need enough producers to justify the time, but we really, really want to host it. So those workshops are, again, you need to attend all 4. So the whole program consists of all 4 workshops. That's May 17th, July 12th, August 2nd, and October 18th. So if you need that flyer and registration, just send me an email. My contact information is listed. I also have it up on the website too. I did have a typo on one of the registration forms. So just to clarify, the cost of the program is $200. There was a typo on one of them that was saying $250. It is $200. So if you have questions on that or just can't remember, let me know and I'll get that to you. With that, I think we are going to wrap it up, and we'll see y'all again in just a couple of weeks.